All right, we're live now. So Electra, are you gonna
Okay,
introduce CreateAWorld? Or am I?
I'll do it. Well, welcome everybody to Create a World. This is the collaborators call. So we're the people who've been interviewing people. I like that. People interviewing people, people in conversation with people. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
We, several years ago, we enjoyed being in conversation with each other about what was rising and what was occurring around us and watching for patterns. And then we thought, why not interview other people? Why not talk to all these wonderful people who are out there creating new realities? And so we did. And this month we've talked about the body, we've talked about nature and the age of Aquarius. And today is kind of is the collaborators. All one is two are missing, but they have been part of the story that we've been weaving this month, primarily about the collective experience in and how it's how we're perceiving it in our bodies and our spirits. So welcome. Deb, you had the thought about the
Yeah.
collective. You want to start off?
Before the call, before we went live on YouTube, we always do. We always just chat among ourselves. And well, Victoria, I'm gonna need you to prompt me because you said, tell me what you said again, because that's the one. If the doing really gets us, if being's not engaged, but you said it better.
Oh, oh, I'm sorry. That was Tantra
That
talk.
was I thought it was fine. Whichever one of you, would you say it better than what I just said? Or did that do?
I think it was, I'll paraphrase it. The cost of,
The
okay,
cost
let
of
me take
There's a cost of doing
it
without being
with being not engaged. Yeah.
being not present.
Yeah.
thank you.
And we all just said, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I don't so that's I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we've all been noticing that if we just I suppose for myself, there's certain things I do, whether being is engaged or not, like brush my teeth or whatever. But I've even shifted how I do dishes, which is always something that I don't enjoy or didn't enjoy. But I've shifted even there to a state of being. And what do we mean by that? Wow. I didn't think about how to describe that before I got all excited about, oh, let's talk about that. Um,
Can I add a couple of things, Deb?
please do.
So in the LOC Institute, in the creation templates, and in many, many spiritual disciplines, you're about to hear a cat fight. It's right behind me.
Here, here.
Oh, don't worry, Electra, they're working on it. They're working
Oh,
on it.
there's a hiss level here. Okay.
Oh, and now we have the dog looking for the cat fight. So just a typical Sunday morning. Isn't that a song? Um, but we talk about the observer and the power of the observer. And the power of the observer is being. I have to show you the dog. It's too sorry, it's just to see he's watching for the cats. Because they're working up to a 5 cat fight behind me, but he can't get behind me to get up here. So he's asking me to let him out the front door so he can engage. In case we think the humans rule. But with this heart event I had really dramatically challenging in December and January and most of February. The two things that were demanded of me, or I wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty heavy duty demand. And one was stay the observer and not the craver. Oh, see?
She's trying.
Gotta see what's going on.
Now that's being very clearly
There
demonstrated.
might be a craving in there as well.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bit of a craving in there, I promise you. 5 cats, how much fun is that? But the point is that what I had to do to be the observer was be calm.
Hmm.
And if I wasn't only calmly observing, I had my blood pressure going into where you have a stroke, basically, and die. And but because of that, someone came to visit me, and they were hypervigilant and anxious, and it was like sandpaper on a you know all for days. And no offense to them in any way, I invited them here to have a space to find a medical and alternative therapies, because where they live overseas just didn't have them available to them. But it was such an amazing contrast between what I was having to be with no choice, and to have the difficulty of trying to stay that in the energy of hypervigilance and anxiety and do you know? And kudos to her. I mean, a million kudos to her, because we were talking about it this morning or last night, because my need, and she also does healing work, my need to have her not be that way turned out to be her healing process.
Hmm.
But believe me, I wasn't paying attention to healing her. I was paying attention to surviving her.
Hmm.
But and I think it's one of the things I want to add about my love of healers is for most healers, I actually I really haven't run into too many egotistical healers, to be quite honest. There is an observing that comes from a sensitivity to the body, or the psyche in my case, or some dynamic of energy, or some dynamic of flesh, that is a very distinct observer that is not observing through circumstance, where most human beings observe through circumstance. How am I going to deal with this circumstance? But I have found, generally speaking, of course, that speaks to all of us, and the 2 others that aren't here, Liz and Lori, and a lot of our guests, there's a phenomenon of actually observing on behalf of, in this case, calm. In this case, what would be the environment that would allow, basically Tantra Maat's blood pressure and not to go up where she feels like, she's going to have a stroke. And just to give you a little bit more background, it's not about the blood pressure. I have a condition, it's called PVCs. And PVCs are premature ventricular contractions. And it's all right to have them if they're inside the 2% range, but mine went up in the 15% range, which means my heart won't make it if the electrical dysfunction keeps up. So, and there's one more thought I want to have about this, and then throw it out to you all. Mara, she and I did a talk on Out Past the Edge about, she talked about, I can't remember the term. I started to say retroactive, but that's not it. Anyway, oh my God, I can't believe the term. Anyway, it's causality, but it's not cause and effect like we have it.
Reciprocity?
Yeah, reciprocal causality, something like that. But the point is that I think Jackie and I got a taste of that. It's like a phenomenon that unless you're forced into the circumstances of it, in the case of we're mostly doers, not beers, if we hadn't been forced into the circumstance of it, I don't think we would have retroactive causality. So it's how something reaches back, like the creation templates. It's like it reaches back into the moment before and gathers the information and brings it forward. So we have cause and effect, like if we throw a ball, then someone catches it, that's cause and effect. But we'll say it's retroactive and somebody can correct me eventually. But in retroactive causality, you're back where even the thought of throwing the ball, even all the years that the man developed himself to throw a ball, all that's coming forward to grab the moment and
Yeah.
bring it back into everything that had happened up until that moment to create a moment of now. That's a simple way to say it. But the fascinating thing is to be living these higher quantum nature of things. I shouldn't say Kara, these quantum natures of things that we just don't have. It's just that we haven't been given the right information to recognize what is happening. And we're having to live it and remember it to even get a kind of a new cognitive logic about it even. I think that's the best I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it can be shocking. At least that's what it was for me. When all of my health conditions started 2 years ago, well, the big ones, there was not a capacity to do very much. And it was shocking to find out I'd accessed being through doing instead of the other way around. And it wasn't fun. Wasn't fun at all. And to watch the impact on so for me that actually calls into question, did I actually access being through doing? Probably not, but that's what I thought. And the impact on relationship and has been really the biggest, most noticeable for me, and making room for others. Not just because I needed others to help me get stuff done. Not just that at all. And now, and I don't know, I don't know how to, I'm, I don't know how to talk about it.
Deb,
Yes.
I'd love to respond to what you said about making room for others. And for me, it occurs that unless I make room for myself, how can I make room for others?
Can you
And
say more
I'm
about that?
emotional about in saying that making room for myself first is the state of beingness. It invites the connection, the glue of who we are to one another, and in that the doing just simply rises. And I can go back many years ago when Tantra would talk about doing the dishes. And are you doing the dishes from your beingness? And so it doesn't matter what the activity is the activity rising from the state of being that is the recognition of that connection to yourself that gives you the connection to others.
That's so beautifully said. And it makes sense that bridges. I didn't have the articulation for how it bridged into yesterday, just by, those coincidences, the serendipities that are not accidents. A few weeks back, I came across a young man and his friend. They're still in high school, but they're developing basically a landscape business, a handyman business. And I needed somebody to help me with some projects in the garden. And yesterday, I have wanted trellises for my blackberries and raspberries for years. And we've done makeshift things that didn't really look very good. They didn't hold up. And they didn't look very good. And they provided minimal support for the blackberries and raspberry vines, which gives, a healthier plant and then more berries. And it's prettier. And I could have bought the trellises online on Amazon, but I still needed help getting them installed. But for some reason, I didn't want to. And just one thing led to another. But that is such a fundamental place of being for me. That's and what you said about including myself, I never thought about that. Never thought about it that way ever. And so as I'm talking and I'm thinking, how does the trellises relate to what we're saying? But I know it does. And then what you just said is the relationship. And now I have made out of scrap wood. So from one point of view, it doesn't look as polished as what I might have bought from wherever. But they're the most beautiful things, these trellises for my blackberries and raspberries, made by these two young men who have dreams. First of a business, because high school is about to be over for one of them. And he's graduating this May. And the other one, I don't know how long after that. And one of them wants to be a pediatrician. That's his dream, And here's these two kids who work like fiends. I mean, it's amazing. It's just amazing. And it's astonishing how learning. I'm going to be sitting with that for a long time, Victoria. That was really quite something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Electra, get yourself in here when I want to share a story if Janice doesn't launch herself in between.
I was just wondering when she was saying that this is when you are young, you have a state of being in your body that you assume will always be there. Like these young men who are working really hard. They had a physical capability, but the assumption behind it is this is what I have. This is me. And the difference is when we get older is that the body doesn't have the capabilities that it had, unless I guess you keep really active. And that seems to be the most startling for most people. And maybe that's when this recognition of your being state finally makes itself obvious, because you begin to understand the difference between your physical capabilities and who you are as a being and how you transmit that being state. That it isn't like, I remember when I was young, I just was like, I can carry furniture, I can do all, I was strong. Was that whole era where the women could. We were trying to say, hey, we're not these helpless little things. And now I have to say, okay, some of that isn't there anymore, but how is it still me? Because inside we feel it is still us, whatever we perceive to be the us, my feeling of me. And it's a different sensation internally to be able to note my state of being versus my state of doing. And that's almost what, you were saying earlier, Deb, is that you were used to being the doer and the one responsible and the one getting the job done. And you thought that was your being state. And what you found out when you had an illness was that, guess what?
Nope.
It was you were experiencing being the doer, not your being state. So how do you differentiate that? Because this is what I'm trying to deal with in myself is what is me now, the being state, versus what I've always thought of as my doer, get the job done. Do you remember that differentiation for you? Because I think it was very dramatic for you.
Yeah, I suppose from inside the doing place, looking back, I would think, oh, now I have to ask for help. And I didn't like it for a long time at all. But then something changed. I don't even remember, nothing I can remember that was notable, or dramatic or anything, but that one was now two or three or four. It was collaborative. The beingness was across more than one person, on behalf of getting things done. And I don't mean that the doing is the most important.
Yeah, but your fun was in the relationship with the boys, not in what they did for you.
Right.
Which
Well, it was both, but yes.
Yeah, no, but the fun was in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the relationship with the inanimate thing for me, which of course is animate. The trellis is fun because it's pretty and it's sturdy. So there's a pleasure. We come here as pleasure and pain. And my belief is that there's a phenomenon in being that is pleasure.
Yeah.
Versus pain. But I'm interrupted, but I got to tell my Jen story.
Okay.
So I have a young woman that comes to help me out. I wouldn't have made it. When I went down for the count, my daughter was in Mexico. And without her to get the dog and to come to the hospital, I truly don't think I would have made it. She's my hero. So one of the deals is when I have to go do things, she drives, or else I take her with me just till I can get stabilized. And I'm a lot better than I was, but I'm not stable. So we went to Michael's, and let's just say Jen majors in being, and therefore is a bone of contention for just about everybody she knows. And Victoria, she majors in giving herself a place. First. So we're in Michael's. I only go to, because Michael's is great. I'm not to advertise a store, but they 40% off things a month before a Christmas or a month before St. Patrick's Day in my case. And then they 70% off everything from the holiday before. This is a plug for Michael's. I've been gathering over the last 3 years Valentine's Day things, and through my 70% off sale. So there's our advertisement for Michael's for the day. But so we go and we have the best time figuring out what St. Patrick's Day, Leprechaun Day things we're going to get for 40% off. And so then there are these little stuffed animals. So the two ladies in front of us they can't figure out how to get the credit cards to work. So here's Jen. The line is like 16 people. She's gathering the little huggy things with the big eyes, the little stuffed animals with the big eyes. She's picking one up, and the lady that's on the other side of the aisle, she goes, "Good morning. How are you this morning? Are you having trouble standing in line and just being?" And the whole place went into complete shock. Everybody that was irritated, racing, pissed off, these two women couldn't figure out how to use their credit cards. And then Jim just starts picking up the toys and handing them to the women. in the line and doesn't care. They're just like, and she's talking to the little creatures. And then she picks up these little chickens. You remember the wind-up chickens, little plastic things? She has 7 of them running around on the counter. And it broke it. Nobody could stay fixed. Nobody could hold. And they're needing to get it done and to get shopped and get home to pick up the kids at school. So I just think that this topic came up today is I got it really demoed yesterday.
Yes.
And when people come in, she go, welcome to Michael's. And you could see because there are only 2 people at the counter, you could see them relaxing. And then everybody started playing. Everybody was like kids in the candy store. Within, she made it in about 10 minutes. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about when we're over this chatty Cathy in our head about, I couldn't, because I'm a doer. People don't bother. Their common statement is, we don't want to bother you. We don't want to bother you because you're so busy. So me not being busy is quite stunning. But yesterday I was like, wow, God, there's a world I might be missing here. Just being here, regardless of what I have to do. And then for me, a long time ago, because I do like to have like 12 projects going at a time. Everything had to become ritual. Everything had to become meditation.
That's good.
If it was a to-do list, I was not going to make it. That's just a simple way of it. Everything was a scheduled meditation, whether it was with dishes, picking up the dog, feeding myself, that if I didn't stay in that meditative, and now this, be here completely now this, be here completely now, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I've gotten, basically.
Yeah.
Right, Miss Janice, over to you.
So I think it's important for all of us to take a minute and remind ourselves that we were raised in a culture that, most of us anyway, that prizes doing. And what's the famous phrase? No pain, no gain. And that's the antithesis of being. And so, so to me, as so many people in the West then started to, for instance, look at, Eastern philosophy and to say, okay, well, this sort of mindset isn't working for me anymore. I want a more full existence. And they started to look to Eastern cultures where there was a little bit more of an embrace of being. Then we started to expand out a little bit. But still having to do that inside the container of no pain, no gain. And so, I think that I crave that part of the evolution, the revolution that is coming for our species is that we really can go back to our indigenous way of being. Because again, to me, when you look at indigenous cultures, that's exactly what you were describing earlier, Deb, about being across all people, right? Across a community, across a group,
Right.
in service of. And then we feel connected, and then it can be fun.
And it's had to be that way, quite literally. But I'm going to take it a step further with the ritual. Because I feel a depth of something there, a depth of being. But as you're talking, I'm thinking about the trellis. And it really is because they built it for me. There's, in a certain way, it looks like it doesn't have the refinement, that the store-bought would. But it is just so beautiful, just like when our children make things for us and we keep them forever because our kids made them for us. And they're just fabulous. I just,
And
and
I would argue they're infused with the beingness
yeah.
of that individual.
And
And
even
that's
if
why we're
I'm
drawn to them.
imagining it or making it up, which I can imagine some would say, to me, those trellises, they not only represent dreams of mine, but these young men have dreams. They're 19 years old and they already, like Russ sat down with them and talked with them about some financial intelligence stuff, and they already, not all of it was unfamiliar to them. So they've been engaging in their future. And it's so important to me to, I don't talk to them about it yet. I don't know if I ever will, but to steward their dreams. And how I show that is I'm going to keep hiring them until I don't, or until they can't.
And I just want to add a recent something you said. They're actually creating their future in the now.
Yes.
That they're actually, that's number one. And the second thing, just to those that are listening, I better go. I haven't gone over to look at the YouTube chat, so I will do that in a minute. But it's actually why I was given the instructions to start CreateAWorld, so that these stories would have a place. These are 19-year-olds. They're not talking about conspiracy theories, and they're not talking about what was the world and we're all going to H in a handbasket. They're busy building trellises because they have a dream. And never in the history of humanity has humanity ever ceased to exist. This little species that can be killed by everything from a parasite to a virus to being stepped on by a dinosaur.
To a volcano erupting,
And yet, we're still building trellises. We're still in the CreateAWorld was established to be in your company. And in the beginning, when we started this, we said to the public, we said, we're really doing this for us, like you said, Victoria, because we wanted to be in you viewers' company, and we wanted you all to be in our company. And I think one of the things I just want to point out is we're starting to see how that's actually bleeding into or flowing into our own existence with more sentient awareness. And that's the other thing I think when we struggle with thought, we struggle with logic. But I think what we're beginning to get more intelligent about is the sentience, is to feel something, to sense something, to feel alive. And the thing for me, and being practically dead for 2 months, is that God, I could feel the richness of every time I got to be alive.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anybody knows about high blood pressure, but it comes with terrifying anxiety. And for someone who's not used to having terrifying anxiety, I felt like a monster had swallowed me. It was terrible. But because of it, retroactively, causal, every time I wasn't there, oh my God, the purity of life was and I couldn't even get off the sofa and go to the bathroom without my blood pressure going up. But the purity of just life, because I can't do without crying, was just pretty profound. And like you said, Deb, it began to build something that it has no language and reason or logic, but it does have sentient intelligence in the way we're experiencing it.
The whole time you were doing your broadcast conversation, Victoria, was it only last week? One of my favorite movies is Hair from decades ago, but the Age of Aquarius, and that's what they were after, was the sentience of aliveness. They were after everything we're talking about, and of course back then that was a pretty radical movie, but I love it. I that's still one of my favorite movies, and oh man. So, and it just keeps coming up in my mind as we're talking now. That's what they were trying to activate. Those couple of young people doing very counterculture things. They were trying to activate this kind of aliveness. And it's so fascinating to me, Tantra, as you're speaking, that the half deadness or basically led to your aliveness and mine and many others, you know? It's just amazing.
Oh, I'd
Nice.
love to respond.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was in a conversation this week, I'll say this week. And it was about that survival and how I've been in a kind of a listening for how to share with others the notion from yoga tradition of we all have an inherent survival mechanism that operates in our psyche. And when we get close to a death experience, it kicks in on our behalf to keep us alive because it has to. That's its job. And so I've been in a curious play of when I feel survival come upon me, can I consciously kick in this mechanism and see what I see in that? And for me, Tantra, that's what you shared the story of, is what I've been playing. Well, why don't I just consciously experience what survival mechanism is for me in daily life? And you just took it to like the nth degree because that was the moment that was upon you. And I have to be transparent and say my husband's been through this in the past. And so to be the calm, steady force for someone to find their own calm, I can now see in myself the potency of what that gift was for me as the capacity to be who I am with another who is in survival or this abhinivesa moment. And there's a richness to the experience that I have in that I didn't know until it really started evidencing itself this year. Has been very potent in a totally different way for me than it has in the past.
Wow.
And I know it's that state of being is a reliable sourcing for me now.
I'm Electra, I'm just going to jump in for a short story along that line and over to you. The one thing about having to sit still for 2.5 months, you gather a lot of stories. But it was working with Jackie, and really seriously kudos. And she just had 2 or 3 just amazing breakthroughs like that in a row. Her consciousness, like you said, Victoria, started picking up on something that had just basically not been present. And then she started what I call working it herself, which is always my greatest joy when somebody can take what I'm moving with them and suddenly I got it. Hand me the reins, I got it. So this is how the conversation went. It all started with her laughing, and she said something like, well, now I know what they mean about you just don't go visit Tantra, and that she comes with a warning. And then she said, I said, well, when we had Sanctuary in Washington, D.C., we called it a halfway house for the intuitively aware. And she all that to do that laughing. She said, well, I think you should call this a halfway house for the sacredly impaired. And I knew she was on the other side. From now on, she was swimming through the choppy water. She'd be fine. And so this morning or yesterday, I don't remember time, you know, she said something about, vacuuming started all this. I said, well, we have one of your first commandments, do not vacuum. So that's kind of the other thing. It's the joy. We're in an evolutionary emergence.
Yeah.
And when we find ourselves, I don't think we can causally done it. We find ourselves surrendering into it. There's quite a bit of humor there. Because there's just not a thing we can do about it, frankly. Over to you, Electra.
Well, I guess I was thinking back to the conversation about sentience and what is my sentient registers for the being state. A lot of it's in nature and just being out and connecting, but it's relationship with nature. The other one is that sentience of just like what you were describing, with suddenly everything is clicking between me and another person or me and several other people. Those are kind of my markers or registers for the being state. Because one of the things I'm fascinated with right now is like, what does a state of not doing precipitate? And is it just stillness? And from society's standpoint, it's no value, right? You're just sitting there, you're not doing anything. And then what is the learning or experience of the doing nothing for yourself? Because sometimes it, like you've talked about, is very rich. And other times it is like a blank slate. And it is in the internal sentience of registering what's occurring that I think we discover the difference between being sitting in blank space and just being. So we're all trying to decipher this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working through the artist way, and one of the primary tools of that process is morning pages. So the idea is you wake up in the morning and the very first thing that you do is you just write 3 pages of whatever shows up. And I think, and one of the things that it's demonstrated to me is how little space I've carved out in my life to hear my own voice. I mean, we sort of all have this internal dialogue that's always running, but there's a difference between being still enough to hear it and give it a place versus saying, oh yeah, okay, I'll deal with that later. And I mean, just imagine if we raise children to start their day with, just sitting in their own space, and listening to their own sentience, and that's, for me, that's very much what this process is designed to do, is to allow your own sentience to rise. And because we've been raised in a culture where we're also taught to assign everything labels of good or bad, and feeling, A, B, or C is good and feeling X, Y, or Z is bad, that stillness is really scary, because many times the first thing that bubbles up in the stillness is pain that's trying to get our attention, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain or whatever. And there's, the question is, can we sit with it long enough to allow the next level of sentience to rise, which is, and the gift here, the message here for you is blah, 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 blah. But that's scary for a lot of people. And I think that's why for all of us, we're talking about having to have processes and discipline and really, really putting effort into giving this sort of beingness a place, because even though it's our inherent state of being as a human, it's not the inherent state of being in our culture.
Right.
And you look lazy, dysfunctional,
Worthless.
worthless,
Apathetic.
apathetic. Yeah, it's you know, in the piece of work some of us did recently, I made a promise. I always keep my promises. I made a promise that by the end of the year, we would see evidence of states of being that lowered teenage suicide, because they're not being allowed. They're in the crossfires of a culture that's dying, that is insisting they know what they need, what they're supposed to do. And this deep, profound nature of being that has them do video games and develop avatars of really phenomenal beings, and um and I can feel in these conversations we've been in and the work we've been doing and others, that we don't realize we're all connected like a relational web. We still think of ourselves like stick figures that we meet on the meet in time somewhere on a ground somewhere. But these conversations and others and the way we've begun to exist, it will influence who comes after us, because we can dismantle in our being. We can be being. And because we're all energetically connected, it can begin to flow into the culture itself. And just those of you that are on the chat, I am posting the chat for all the collaborators to read. So I just want you to know that you're as fundamental to the conversation as we feel. We wouldn't feel good in this conversation if you weren't there, as good in this conversation if you weren't there.
I really think the points that were just made about the space in between, the times of being assumed to be lazy or no longer of any value to society, all those kinds of things that come from, I experienced a lot of that, the thought forms that seem to rise from within me, but they're imprints. And having to, even in my own family, take the territory of, I'm still here. I still do things or be things that make a difference in this family. And it was really wild to watch. We've talked a fair amount amongst ourselves and some in these conversations about compassion and empathy. And to have to grab onto that like a lifeboat, quite literally, was it was complicated. It was complicated to be in my own anxiety around the implications of those thought forms, know that the other people were just as caught in that as I was, and whether they were family members or, whoever else I was interacting with, and bring it to some kind of I don't know what to call it, non-abusive conclusion, really. In other words, meaning that I didn't get abusive and in my words or way of being. And to keep it real and keep it human. That was quite a challenge. Quite a challenge.
See, that opens me up for thinking, because, and I think we all are familiar with what we really are, those of us, this group, we are really truly struggling to articulate things that have not been articulated before in the manner within which that they can transmit to others, and I have this single phrase that has come out of me. It's like a warning, but if you ask me what it meant, I couldn't tell you. It's just that it stops me cold. And one of the things I was asked is to only do one thing at a time. And I'm a definite multitasker. But because I have this little thing called a heart monitor, a blood pressure monitor, and because my face would go numb and I couldn't breathe, I could tell the minute I started multitasking that there was something about I crossed the flow of simply being there fully with something. And it was really startling to me. But the other thing that happened was how much doing is connected to anxiety and how is connected to hypervigilance. Like this measure of being, false being, is how much you get done and how successful you are in doing it. So now the place that the inquiry you gave me, Deb, and that is, I experience harming myself now if I try to multitask. And yet multitask seems like such a innocuous word, doesn't it?
Right.
But I actually I experience, if I'm not completely present to what there is to be present to when I'm to be doing that, if it is itself is not the fulfillment of the moment, if what it's going to buy me or what it's going to have people say about me or whether I'm going to be in the success register of the society, it is so the finesse of it, the amazing subtleness of it.
Yes.
I can feel myself harm myself now.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
I almost am crying because I would never do that to me if I knew better.
But it's, yeah.
Go ahead.
What I was just going to say is I remember that being installed as a value system in our culture, that it was good to be doing 3, 4, 5 things at a time. I even remember a minister giving a sermon on that and me going like, you have got to be kidding me. That it didn't make sense coming from a minister that's supposed to be talking about, kind of the being state. At least that's what I thought. But that was a value that was installed and we bought it. We bought that hook, line, and sinker. And the biggest thing you went through, Sandra, was to find out that that was not a value that was good for your body or good for you.
And the other thing is that the fear, because it's, in my case, it's irrational fear because there's no evidence. I'm not in a situation where the fear is real. Do you understand?
Right.
But I could tell the fear was about being abandoned by my own society.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could feel that I would no longer belong to and therefore the contribution I came to make would never get made. Boy, if that's not a tangled web.
It's very tangled.
Yeah,
And
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 that's
the thing
something.
is that brain researchers will tell you that multitasking is actually a myth.
Yep.
There's no such thing as multitasking. There is merely shifting your attention from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing to another rapidly, which really keeps you at a very shallow level, right? And yet where we experience bliss and joy and connection is when we allow ourselves to really sink into the depth of being with something.
I actually told a professor once who was teaching about the myth of multitasking and that the stress of it is harmful. I just said flat out, that's just not true at one point. And then we had to do an experiment and I found out, yes, it was true. But it didn't change my behavior in life until recently. And those fears are real. It takes a lot of courage and creativity to face, I won't belong to society the same way. But my choice is accepting that as a life is over sentence, which I don't, or the deeper engagement. I wanted to say the harder work because that's how it's occurred to me, but the deeper engagement of what do I create instead? And how do I do it with others? And I'm kind of in the process of finding that little place in myself from which to build. And that's kind of another, I didn't realize it till this minute. That's another piece of working with those two young men, is I'm finding that place in myself that I can build from for a different place in the world. And when they're here, I get out in the garden with them. I said, you make me work, and that's good. Because I said that, and then somebody said, one of the two of them said, oh no. And I said, no, that's good. That's good. You get me moving, engaged. I'm part of something. And, I didn't say it well at all.
Well, there's a difference in engaging from a being state
Yes.
instead of engaging from, I gotta get it done.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest thing when we retire, we often go through, a lot of people I know go through the thought that I am no longer of value. And then you search for, how do I be engaged and enjoying
In a
versus-
society that doesn't encourage that focus, the culture, as you say, Janice, until, retirement is something to look forward to and aspire to. And then it's like, uh-oh, the other shoe dropped. I didn't know I was going to have to learn to be.
And a lot of people don't. That's the saddest part about it. It becomes a stagnation stage for some people instead of an opening up to.
Yeah. And the creativity called for, can be something to rejoice. I'm almost there. Not quite. But I can feel it and see it, that it's available. The creativity that's called for.
And so that's what we're inviting all of you into. Again, I mean, we come together to have a conversation with each other, not because we have answers, but really because we have questions. And we want you to know that we're there in the questions with you, and we're happy to know that you're there in the questions with us. And that's what we're all about here in CreateAWorld.
Thank you all. We're ending a little early, 2 minutes early, but we started a minute early, so we're trying not to be regimented. We thought we'd do this just to relax into our being. And may you all have an incredible being day. And we'll see you next week on CreateAWorld. Take precious care.